Exactly! Oh, hey everyone, welcome back to our show.
We are already having way too much fun in the studio today to join us.
That's right, so grab a drink, get comfortable, and conversation.
Paint a picture with me for a second, if you would. You're standing in the middle of a crowded grocery store.
Oh yeah, we've all been there.
Right. The fluorescent lights are humming, shopping carts are rattling over the tile, and suddenly right in front of you, a child completely melts down. I mean, we are talking screaming, thrashing on the floor, the whole 9 yards.
Every single eye in the aisle turns to look.
Exactly. It's intense. But here's the ultimate question for anyone who cares for a developing human. Is that child throwing a tantrum just to get a candy bar? Or, are they experiencing a genuine, completely involuntary emotional crisis?
It's a huge distinction, a really critical one.
Because if you misdiagnose that moment, you could actually be worsening their distress. You might even be accidentally wiring their brain for lifelong anxiety, which is terrifying.
It is, yeah.
So today, we are decoding the meltdown. Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission is to unpack the fascinating, chaotic, and sometimes totally overwhelming world of childhood and adolescent emotions.
There is a lot to cover.
So much. We are going to explore the wild neurological construction zone that is the teenage brain. And we are going to arm you with practical tools from post-crisis action plans to specific books to help the young people in your life build true emotional resilience.
I think what is so crucial to understand right out of the gate here is that human emotion, especially in young, developing brains, it operates in incredibly muddy waters.
Muddy how? Like we just don't understand it.
Well, more like we tend to view frustration as the enemy, We see a meltdown and our immediate biological instinct is just, I have to stop this right now. Make it quiet.
Oh, for sure. Make the screaming stop.
Right. But if we actually look at the clinical psychology and the neurobiology, frustration is, it's actually a highly necessary building block for a healthy adult mind. How we interpret that frustration, whether we see it as a tantrum or a crisis that completely dictates whether we are helping that child build psychological calluses or if we're just traumatizing them further.
Okay, so let's pull those two things apart immediately. The meltdown matrix, I like to call it. The sources emphasize that misdiagnosing a tantrum versus an emotional crisis is literally dangerous. So what are the actual mechanics of a tantrum?
Well, a tantrum is fundamentally goal-oriented.
Goal-oriented.
Yeah. It happens when a child faces a boundary or maybe an unexpected change in their routine or, they simply cannot get what they want. You will see crying, shouting, throwing things. But the core driver here is just a lack of emotional control to appropriately express their frustration about a specific denial.
So they want the candy bar, you said no.
Yeah.
And their response is to use the biggest, loudest tools they have to get you to reverse that decision.
That's essentially it. They don't have the sophisticated vocabulary to look at you and say, I am profoundly disappointed by your decision to deny me sugar.
Right. They can't negotiate a treaty, so they just scream.
Exactly. But an emotional crisis is a completely different neurological event. An emotional crisis is entirely involuntary.
Involuntary. Like they have zero control.
Zero. The child is not trying to manipulate a situation at all. They have literally lost control of their nervous system. These episodes are the result of severe sensory overload.
Wow. Okay, so it's physical.
Very physical. To a child in crisis, the grocery store isn't just annoying. The hum of the lights is deafening. The visual input of the crowded aisles is blinding. The texture of their own clothing might feel like sandpaper.
That sounds terrifying, honestly.
It is. Or, a crisis can be triggered by traumatic events, a sudden separation, the loss of a pet, a major family illness. The brain essentially short circuits to protect itself from this massive flood of overwhelming input.
So how does it end then, if they can't control it?
A crisis only ends when the sensory input is drastically reduced or when the child literally collapses from pure physical exhaustion.
I'm thinking about this like technology. Like a tantrum is kind of like getting a pop-up error message on your computer because you clicked the wrong button.
Oh, I like that.
Right. It's super annoying, it's loud, it interrupts what you're doing, but it's manageable. You just set a boundary, hit the X, and close the window.
Yep, exactly.
But an emotional crisis is like the computer's internal hard drive overheating. The cooling fan is screaming, the system is frying, and the computer forcefully shuts itself down just to protect the hardware from melting.
I love that analogy because it perfectly illustrates the stakes of how we respond. Think about what happens if you treat a crisis like a tantrum.
You'd just be clicking X on a melting computer.
Right. If a child's hard drive is overheating from sensory overload and you respond by yelling, issuing harsh disciplinary limits, or, forcing them to sit in a highly stimulating timeout chair,
You're just making it worse.
you are pumping more heat into a system that is already failing. You completely worsen the overload. On the flip side, if a child is having a goal-oriented tantrum at pop-up and you give in and buy them the candy bar just to make the noise stop, you rob them of a vital opportunity.
The opportunity to learn how to tolerate the feeling of frustration.
Exactly. You are teaching their brain that the error message works. You're actively rewarding the pop-up.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so by doing that, you wire their developing brain to believe that explosive, disruptive behavior is literally the most efficient tool for problem solving in the real world.
Which is setting them up for massive failure later in life.
That makes a lot of sense. But if an emotional crisis is an involuntary system overload, recognizing when these overloads are happening has to be key. Because I know if a parent or caregiver is doing everything right, setting good boundaries, and the child is still melting down constantly, a lot of parents will internalize that. They'll think, I am a failure.
Oh, absolutely. The guilt is real.
So how should they be looking at this instead? When do you call for backup?
They need to view it as a diagnostic clue. It is absolutely not a parenting failure. The clinical data provides very specific metrics for when a caregiver should consult a child development expert or pediatrician.
What are the metrics? What are we looking for?
You have to look at intensity and duration. Specifically, are you seeing chronic signs of low frustration tolerance?
And what does that look like in practice? Just getting mad at a math problem?
Oh, no, it's much more extreme. This looks like a child abandoning tasks immediately at the very first sign of difficulty, or destroying their work, displaying extreme perfectionism paired with really destructive self-criticism.
Like calling themselves stupid over a tiny mistake.
Yes, repeatedly calling themselves stupid, or a disaster over minor everyday mistakes, or sudden intense mood swings. If those behaviors persist for more than 3 months, that is a major signal.
3 months is the specific benchmark.
Generally, yes, especially if these episodes are exceptionally intense, or if they take hours to recover from, or, if they begin to negatively impact the child's social life, like they can no longer participate in play dates because the meltdowns are just too severe.
Right, it's disrupting their actual functioning.
Exactly. And if the adults in the room, despite trying all the regulatory techniques, are entirely unable to maintain control or help the child regulate, it is time to consult a pediatrician or a child psychologist.
Because at that point, you aren't just dealing with a behavioral quirk. You might be dealing with deeper emotional or neurological needs.
Right. Clinical conditions outlined by the American Psychiatric Association can manifest exactly like this. Frequent, unmanageable crises are often primary symptoms of things like oppositional defiant disorder, or ADHD.
Oh, ADHD. Really?
Yeah, a child with ADHD might become so easily flooded by external stimuli that their threshold for a crisis is much, much lower than a neurotypical child. Seeking professional help is an act of proactive care. It gives both the child and the parent the specific tools they need.
We tend to associate all of these emotional meltdowns with toddlers, the whole terrible twos stereotype.
Oh, sure, everyone braces for the toddler years.
But this emotional roller coaster doesn't just magically resolve when they hit elementary school. In fact, our sources point out that as children enter adolescence, the brain undergoes a radical physical rewiring that actually makes managing frustration even harder.
Oh, the adolescent brain is one of the most fascinating neurological construction zones in nature. To understand teenage emotion, you really have to look under the hood at the neurobiology.
Okay, open the hood. What's going on in there?
So, the human brain matures from back to front and from the inside out. The subcortical areas, the deeper, older parts of the brain mature very early in adolescence.
Which parts are those?
This includes the amygdala, which processes fear, threat detection, and strong primal emotions. And alongside that is the nucleus accumbens, which is essentially the brain's reward center.
Okay.
These areas are fully awake, highly active, and deeply sensitive years before the rest of the brain catches up.
Wait, so if the emotional center and the reward center are fully awake and firing on all cylinders, what is happening with the logical part of the brain?
Well, the logical part of the brain is the prefrontal cortex, or the PFC, located right behind the forehead. You can think of the PFC as the CEO of the brain. It handles logic, executive function, impulse control, risk assessment.
Basically all the adult stuff.
Exactly, long-term planning. But during adolescence, the CEO is essentially out on a coffee break that lasts for several years. The PFC is the very last part of the brain to fully mature. It often doesn't finish until a person is in their mid-20s.
That explains so much. But it's not just the physical structure of the brain, right? You also have a massive chemical shift happening at the same exact time.
A massive shift. You have a flood of hormones, estrogen, testosterone, oxytocin, which amplify emotional responses. But the really critical change happens with dopamine receptors.
Dopamine is the pleasure chemical, right?
Yes, the neurotransmitter responsible for feeling pleasure and satisfaction. Specifically, the D1 and D2 receptors undergo rapid fluctuations in teens. D1 receptors help you focus on specific goals, and D2 receptors are linked to cognitive flexibility and integrating new, exciting inputs.
So their pleasure sensors are just going wild.
Completely. This specific chemical cocktail turns teenagers into extreme novelty seekers. They become hyper-focused on immediate social rewards, peer status, and new experiences, while simultaneously lacking the PFC development to properly evaluate long-term risks.
So if we go back to our analogies, the teenage brain is essentially a high-performance sports car with a massive hormone-fueled engine. But the brakes are still being shipped from the factory.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
They can go 0 to 60 in a second when it comes to an emotional reaction, but they have no mechanical way to stop the car.
That is exactly what is happening biologically. When they try to use those brakes, they are engaging in a process called frontalization.
Frontalization, what is that?
In a fully developed adult brain, we have efficient, automatic neural pathways. If you have a sudden urge to scream at your boss because you are frustrated, your adult brain automatically suppresses that urge before you even fully register it. The neural pathway is heavily paved.
Right. I don't even have to think about not screaming at my boss. I just don't do it.
Exactly. But teens do not have that automatic efficiency. To consciously override their impulses, they have to work significantly harder. They have to actively engage a specific area called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, or DLPFC.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. They are literally burning immense amounts of cognitive energy just to not act on a bad idea.
It takes physical energy for them to suppress an impulse. Wow. No wonder they're exhausted and frustrated all the time.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
But since they are driving this sports car without fully functional automatic brakes, they clearly need external guidance to help them map out this terrain. We need to give them a manual to understand their own minds. Which brings us to books.
Yes, specific resources. What the psychological research suggests is putting highly specific books directly into their hands. But you have to do it strategically. You break it down into narrative fiction first, and then practical guides.
Narrative fiction.
Yeah. For example, there are some great titles in Spanish that are highly recommended for this, like Susana Vallejo Chavarino's El Espíritu del Último Verano, or Fernando J. Lopez's Los Nombres del Fuego, and 27 Latidos by Rafael Salmón.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Mm-hmm.
If a teenager is already overwhelmed, easily frustrated, and their dopamine receptors are craving high-speed novelty, how does handing them a dense novel actually break through?
That's a fair question.
Won't that just feel like more homework assigned by an adult who doesn't understand them?
It totally would if it were a textbook, but narrative fiction bypasses that resistance by hijacking how the adolescent brain is currently wired for identity formation.
Hijacking it how?
Well, during adolescence, a part of the brain called the precuneus, which is heavily involved in self-consciousness, self-reflection, and thinking about oneself, is highly active. Teenagers are obsessed with figuring out who they are.
Right, the classic teenage identity crisis.
Exactly. So narrative fiction doesn't feel like a lecture. It feels like exploring an alternate version of themselves. When they read 27 Latidos, for instance, they project themselves onto a relatable protagonist who's also struggling with identity and intense emotions.
Oh, I see.
When the protagonist faces frustration and learns to work through it, the teen's brain is safely simulating that emotional regulation without the real-world stakes.
That makes total sense. They're basically practicing emotional regulation through a proxy.
Precisely. And then once that baseline of empathy and self-reflection is established through fiction, then you can introduce the practical guides for emotional mapping.
Like what?
A standout recommendation is Una Mochila para Universo by Elsa Ponset. The beauty of this book is how it structures emotional intelligence. It doesn't just tell teens to be calm. It offers 21 distinct routes to navigate different emotions. It treats the emotional landscape like a literal map.
That's very visual. I like that.
Yeah, if a teen is feeling completely overwhelmed by jealousy or anger, the book provides a specific, actionable route to process that feeling, rather than just acting out. Along with that, there are adapted versions of classics, like Daniel Goleman's Intelligentsia Emotional.
Oh, sure. Goldman is foundational for emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. And Travis Bradberry's Intelligentsia Emotional 2.0, or even Wayne Dyer's Tucsonas Erroneas.
Classic self-development stuff.
Right. These books give them the actual vocabulary to label what they are experiencing in their bodies. There's also Mr. Navas and Fernandez Baracol's Manual de Inteligencia Emocional, and for resilience, Cyrilnik and Anaut's Porque la Resiliencia, or Maxwell Maltz's Psychocybernetica.
Okay, so naming an emotion is the first step to taming it, clearly. But here is the reality check.
Let's hear it.
Books are fantastic tools for teens to read on their own time, in a quiet room when they're perfectly regulated. But in the heat of a meltdown, whether you are dealing with a toddler thrashing on the grocery store floor or a teenager slamming doors so hard the drywall cracks, the most powerful tool in the room isn't a book.
No, definitely not.
It's the adult. How you act in that moment directly wires how they will act.
It is the most crucial takeaway from all the developmental research. Children and adolescents learn emotional regulation from the outside in. An infant literally cannot regulate their own nervous system. They require a caregiver to do it for them through physical touch, rocking, soothing tones.
Right.
As they grow into toddlers and even teenagers, they continue to borrow the adult's nervous system during moments of high stress.
Borrowing the nervous system, that is such a powerful image.
It's true, though. If the adult's nervous system is chaotic, the child's will be too.
So how do caregivers effectively model this calm, especially when they are being pushed to their absolute limits?
The guidance is very clear on avoiding two extremes. First, you cannot be overprotective, and second, you cannot be too permissive. You don't bubble wrap them to prevent all frustration, but you also don't just let them run wild to avoid a conflict. Instead, you offer tips to model patient responses by narrating your own internal process out loud.
Can you give me an example of what that actually sounds like in practice?
Sure. Say you are trying to fix a broken appliance and it's not working. Instead of sighing heavily and throwing your tools across the room,
Which is tempting.
very tempting, you say out loud, I am feeling really frustrated right now because this isn't working the way I want it to. I am going to step away, take a deep breath, and try a different approach in 5 minutes.
You are providing a live-action blueprint for how to handle a roadblock.
Exactly. Additionally, you have to avoid rescuing them immediately from small struggles. If a child can't tie their shoe, don't just swoop in and do it for them. Say, I see you're having a hard time, try a little longer, and then I'll help you figure it out if you still need it.
And what about when they are upset about something tiny?
Crucially, never minimize their feelings with phrases like, it's no big deal, or stop crying over something so small.
Because to them, in that moment, it is a massive deal.
Mm-hmm.
Their amygdala is telling them it's a genuine crisis. But let's be real about the biology here for a second. When your child is screaming at you, your own amygdala is firing off alarms. The noise, the defiance, it triggers a biological fight-or-flight stress response in the adult.
Oh, absolutely.
The heart rate spikes. Cortisol floods your system.
Yeah.
How do you realistically model the Zen-like calm when your own biology is practically screaming at you to panic or fight or yell back?
It is incredibly difficult, and psychologists know this. The secret is you don't have to be a Zen master. You just need to rely on a structured protocol. Having a specific step-by-step calming post-crisis plan removes the burden of having to think when your own stress response is activated. You just follow the steps.
Walk us through those steps. I think everyone listening needs this plan.
Step 1, wait for the storm to pass.
Just wait.
Just wait. This is the hardest part for adults because
Yeah.
we want to fix it immediately. But you cannot teach a drowning person how to swim. If they are in a sensory crisis, their brain cannot process verbal instructions. You have to wait until the sensory overload diminishes or physical exhaustion naturally sets in.
Okay, so wait for the biological peak to drop. Got it. What is step 2?
Step 2, pause and breathe, but you do it together. The recommendation is a specific, slow breathing technique, inhaling deeply while counting out loud, 1 elephant, 2 elephants.
I love that.
Doing this together physically forces both of your heart rates to slow down. It signals to the nervous system that the threat has passed.
The tactile nature of that is great. And step 3 is where things get really interesting, right?
Yes. Step 3 is called body drawing, or dibujo corporal in Spanish. Once the breathing is steadier, you have the child draw a simple silhouette of a person on a piece of paper. Then you ask them to take a crayon and color in the specific areas on the drawing where they physically felt the frustration or the anger in their own body.
Wow.
Did their chest feel tight and red? Did their fists feel hot?
That is brilliant. It takes the abstract, terrifying concept of I'm enraged, and externalizes it. It makes it a physical reality they can look at outside of themselves, which has to make it feel more manageable.
Exactly. It connects the emotional experience to the physical sensation, which is a massive step in self-awareness. And then only when they are completely calm and regulated do you move to step 4,
Which is?
the debrief. Now, this is not a lecture about why they shouldn't have screamed. It is a collaborative review based on 2 vital questions. What happened? And what could we do differently next time?
That engages the CEO of the brain.
Yes, it engages that prefrontal cortex and helps them start building those automatic braking systems we talked about earlier.
We have covered some incredible ground today. From the visceral reactions in the grocery store aisles to the intricate neural pathways of the teenage brain.
It's a vast landscape.
It really is. And if there is one core philosophy to pull from all this research, it is that frustration is not an enemy to be avoided. It is an incredibly necessary fundamental emotion for developing tolerance, self-control, and resilience.
The way to think about it is this. If you constantly pave the road for the child, removing every pebble and obstacle, rather than preparing the child for the road, you are denying them the psychological calluses they absolutely need to survive adulthood.
Which brings us to a final, slightly provocative thought for you to mull over. The psychological community talks a lot about the culture of effort. I want you to consider that for a second in the context of your own life.
It's a tough mirror to look into.
It is. If we continually engineer the lives of the young people we care about so that they never face failure, so they never experience discomfort if we swoop in and tie their shoes every single time they struggle, or buy the candy bar just to avoid the tantrum, are we actually protecting them?
Or are we guaranteeing a breakdown later?
Right. Are we guaranteeing that when they become adults, the smallest obstacle, the slightest pushback from the real world will trigger a massive emotional crisis that they have absolutely no tools to survive?
It is a really sobering thought. We have to let them feel the heat of the pop-up error message now, while the stakes are relatively low, so their entire hard drive doesn't crash later in life when it really matters.
So next time you're in that grocery store and a meltdown happens, whether it is your kid or someone else's, maybe just take a breath. Count 1 elephant, 2 elephants, and remember that you are witnessing the messy, loud, essential construction work of a developing human being. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. See you next time.